Hello, everybody. So, I've been snoozing a little bit, but I do have a bunch of podcasts in the hole for you guys. We should be coming fast and furious for December, for your holiday listening, driving around, doing your thing, taking your little vacations as we do here on the South Island, and I find it much less stressful than, or what did I say, South Island? I meant Southern Hemisphere. Middle of summer down here. It's kind of barbecues and beaches at this time of year in New Zealand and Australia. And so resulting in, a lot less stressful. I just remember holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, a lot of fun. I don't want to say stressful because maybe that's the wrong word, but it's just full on. And it just seems it's a lot cruisier down here. Now, the good and bad of that is, you don't get that sentimentality, that sort of endearment you have with the holiday season that you get up north in Europe and North America. But anyway, it's fun nonetheless to have a little bit of a cruisier December coming up outside of all my boys that are out and gals that are out in the vineyards, which seems to be full on at this moment. We're having a great spring in Hawke's Bay. But anyway, today's podcast is always sponsored by decibelwines.com. Please join our wine club. We're about to do our December shipment. You could sign up before the 15th of December for New Zealand and Australia. We're going to add in Australia now. It's a new thing, but you'll pay a bit of shipping to get over there. But we're also now distributed in Australia, in Sydney at least, in the capital district as well. And so keep an eye out for any of you Aussies over there with Decibel Wines. They got all 5 wines over there now in Sydney. It's pretty exciting. I was there last month. And so anyway, I've got 2 more great podcasts coming up with some winemakers. And I have a third one that'll be on hold for a while for a variety of reasons, but I respect the guy's decision to just hang on there for a while. Anyway, I'm drinking a glass of Maxim Chenin Blanc, hint, hint. It's quite delicious. I just say it's really young. I want to give it some more time. I've got another bottle in there I'm going to wait on. Anyway, today's podcast is an interesting one. It seems like, it's great talking to winemakers and getting their stories and their thoughts on everything happening in the region. But, to really talk about some hot issues, it seems like the last 2 have been about water. And as we discuss in this, the first being Mark Krasnow about a month and a half ago. That was a great conversation. Sorry, Dr. Mark Krasnow. And this one being with Xan Harding, who is on the Hawke's Bay Wine Growers Board. He's a wine grower. And he's made some trophy wines grown some trophy wines for Mission, Pinot Ricard, Ash Ridge, Trinity Hill, and of course Decibel. He was the one who grew the 2016 Viognier. So I know Xan fairly well. He was also the viticulturist, or is the viticulturist at Paratua, so we interact quite a bit. But he's a smart guy, and he was definitely the man to talk to about this WCO in Hawke's Bay coming up for the Naroa River, which is such an important issue. I mean, I went to a couple of the meetings, and I mentioned this a couple times in our conversation, and I was a bit confused and really scared. I think I was scared, not that I don't think we can find the right solution, but I'm sort of scared for the community in the sense that I just hope we can have a great conversation and make the right decision and do it. We talk about all our impact on the environment. I think if folks are worried on either end, one that we might compromise the environment in some ways that we don't have to, and in other ones that we, just make a rash decision and affect the people. And, I guess it's about economics, but it's also, and you don't want to say everything's about money, but it's not, it's about people's livelihoods and, people's businesses. We're not talking about giant evil corporations here. We're talking about growers who have put their whole life into, and I'm not just talking about the wine industry. We're talking orchards and farmers and yes, dairy farmers as well, who are going to come out as being somewhat the bad guy in this, but not necessarily for the Nararoa River, as I learned during this. So, in short, I would say that I'm less scared after talking to Xan, that I have more information and I understand the process more, and I feel like, I don't know all the players involved, but I feel like there's a good dialogue going on, and it's certainly sort of above my head or out of my reach to how I can affect things. I can affect things just like anybody else by writing a letter and paying attention and going to the meeting if I want to learn more, and looking online and reading what the Hawke's Bay District Council website says, so which I have done, and I'm trying to do all those things just to get my head around this and understand this, if for nothing else, to explain to my daughter that why we did or didn't get this right. And it is something that's happening right now. We just recorded this podcast. I've actually skipped this ahead of a couple other ones that I've had recorded because I want to get this out there. As we point out early on in our conversation, which, by the way, we just kind of dive right into, so you're going to be thrown in. Xan started talking, and I said, wait, I don't want to turn the microphones on because you're telling me your meeting's right on, 2-3 days from now, when the New Zealand wine growers will go in front of the tribunal. Now, it's one of these things where that it will affect the industry a lot, but we probably don't have as much effect on the water as maybe some other industries do, and certainly not as much as the townspeople and everybody in this region. So, but Xan does a really good job of explaining all that. And, I hope you guys like it, and I think you'll learn a lot. I hope you pay attention, and I hope you go check this issue out for yourself. And listen to what Xan has to say. Really pay attention. There's nothing more important right now than what's going on in the world and in the environment. For you, those of you outside of Hawke's Bay, I think it's an example of how in New Zealand we are trying to get these things right. But no issue is simple. We're a young country, but we've got to all do it together and communicate. And yes, there has to be lawyers involved, and we have to try to do it the right way. So, but for those local people, I just think, you got to listen to this and understand what's going on. This is one perspective from Hawke's Bay wine growers, but I would love to talk to somebody who represents the orchards, and somebody who represents some of the farmers and dairy farmers and things like that. So hope you guys like it. Enjoy. This is Xan Harding talking about the water conservation order here in Hawke's Bay. So you were saying the WCO is going to be wrapped up in a week or so? I stopped you before you said that. What did you mean, like no meetings on it? No meetings on it, or there's going to be a decision, or?
Hell no.
Yeah.
What it will be is the first stage hearings wrap up.
Yeah.
Towards the end next week.
Because it was a big sort of more open thing in November, right? Middle of November, a couple weeks ago.
So it opened up a couple of weeks ago. They've had last week off, and they kick off again Monday, and we're first up. So we've got our legal counsel, James Gardner Hopkins, who's going to be up there for the first hour, reading them their rights.
Yeah.
And then Emma Thompson. Emma Thompson, the Rhine Rider. Yeah. Emma Thompson's heard of what's going on, and she's coming along to have a look as well. But,
good.
No, Emma Taylor's there representing Gimlet wine growers.
So let's back up a second, because I really wanted to talk to you because you obviously know a lot of what's going on, but you come at it from the New Zealand or Hawke's Bay wine growers standpoint. But it's only come on my radar and probably a bunch of other people's radar. You know, we're all busy doing our thing. In the last few months, maybe July, August is when it really started getting a big kick up, and everybody saying come to these meetings. It
got publicly notified back in July, July or August. Something.
And I went to a couple of meetings and was, I don't want to say I was confused by the issue. I think I understand, you know, that they want to conserve some areas and all that, but I was a little confused by probably, which is fair enough, there's a lot of people involved, in what the position is of Hawke's Bay wine growers. I think I'm probably a little clearer now, just having been to a couple of the meetings and heard a few people talk it out. But obviously, I might have a different opinion than you, and you'll have a different one from XYZ grower up the road and all that. So it's got to be a pretty difficult job to come to a unifying front. But the, you know, to me, it just seems like, yeah, well, first of all, where do we stand? And that's a complicated thing, because you want. You know, we want to support some conservation, and we want to don't be seen as the wine industry as any kind of bad guy in it. And I don't think we are. I think we're, you know, certainly compared to a lot of other industries, we're.
I think the thing that people have to accept, get their minds around, is that everybody has an effect on the environment.
Yeah.
And once you get over that and accept that, and the reality is that you can't exist on this planet without having some effect. It's a question of, you know, what you do, you know, to within reasonable bounds that the community sets, to minimise your footprint. Right? And it's just, and it's not a particularly difficult thing to do necessarily, or a mindset to change. But there is in New Zealand, there has been a bit of a them and us to a large degree. Because of the dairy intensification in New Zealand, we have had waterways being degraded, and a lot of finger pointing going on.
It's pretty easy to do that, you know. I mean, it's like right in front of everybody,
and without wanting to, you know, and it's never productive to kind of side one industry against each other, but. You know, if I can say that I'm objective about it, you know, we've got into the space of, you know, much heightened, you know, community concern about the state of our waterways, which still by global standards are incredibly good, but not as good as they could be, and in parts actually quite bad by international standards. Not tragic. I mean, I lived for 5 years in China, and our waterways are not brown, green, and all shades under the sun. You know, open sewers running out of factories, you know, but they have, you know, in parts declined quite significantly, and most of it's around nutrients, and most of that's coming out of cows' asses.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But everybody. But the point is, and there's the question, the point that everyone has an effect, rather than finger pointing and say, look. You know, I might be growing apples. Okay, I'm still, you know, having an effect on the environment. The stuff that I do, my footprint might be, you know, a half or a third or whatever the figure is, but it doesn't mean I can't still do it better and haven't got an obligation to do that. So, I mean, we're fortunate in the wine industry that we're right at the lowest end of environmental impact from a start point. So that, and we've failed to fully appreciate that, and we've failed to quantify that, and we're making great strides now, as we have to understand, but also to get out front and start to, you know, tell that story about just, you know, how good our systems are relative to some others without necessarily trying to drag them down.
I don't know who's growing what around, I mean, what paddock, but I get so frustrated. I'm driving down the road, and I'm right around both these directions I keep going, and they're not vineyards, obviously, because they're giant irrigation sprinklers. Yeah. And they're just spraying out onto the road.
So I mean, just
that's like a simple thing that you're just like, come on, guys.
Yeah, keep it off the roads, a good start. But, you know, again, perspective, you know, we're using, in Hawke's Bay, we're using somewhere between 120 and 200 mils of irrigation in a dry season. Your grass is about 600 mils, so we're a third
of the grass
of the grass.
yeah.
So that's big. That's because of the because we farm. We're not farming to grow leaves. We're farming to keep the plants lean and mean and just and work them pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean,
but we can't do it. Our current systems can't do it without water.
For people outside even Hawke's Bay, but some of these industries, I think there's two things. One is we had a big water scare in Havelock with some people getting really sick, and a couple died, right?
Yep.
A couple older folks they were,
yes.
Right? And I know some families who had some kids that were sick for quite a long time, and so it's definitely in the public. Not it's in the zeitgeist right now.
Yeah, I reckon 5,000 people got sick.
Yeah,
so,
quite a lot.
Serious.
And then on top of that, for people who don't know that much about Hawke's Bay, it's breadbasket in New Zealand. There's there's farms everywhere. There's vineyards everywhere, orchards they're everywhere you turn. And then there's these nice towns and beachfronts, but the towns themselves are taking water as well. Like you said, everybody's got something to do with it. So. It's a hot topic, I would just say,
And and the environment and water in particular has become very politicised in Hawke's Bay, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is, as you say, it's because of things like the Havelock North drinking water contamination, but also before that the whole proposal, the Ruataniwha proposal and concerns around the declining state of the Tukituki River.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and because because on the one hand there were pretty significant concerns from the environmental community and the community at large about the state of the Tukituki. Just there's too much nitrogen getting into the system and too much algal growth over the summertime. Which is a classic sign of a river that's in less, pristine condition than it should be.
Yeah.
So, but also at the same time, the local authorities wanting to foster land use intensification development and just the improvement to the community, the productive community in the central Hawke's Bay up the river, and pushing the large scale dam proposition pretty hard. Possibly a bit too hard, and might have been more successful if they'd been a little more independent in the way they went around about things, rather than taking such a position of such a strong advocate for the scheme. But anyway, so any event that was the start of the really high level of politicisation in water. But anyway, getting to the water conservation order, the key thing that people need to understand about that is that this is the Narara River, which flows from central North Island right down, and this falls from a pretty high level. I can't tell you how many metres it is, but it's thousands of metres, and it's from pristine bush, and it comes all the way down to come out between Napier and Hastings at the coast there. The top half or so of it is either completely pristine or as close to it. There's probably the top third has got no farming in it at all.
Yeah.
There's some extensive pastoral farming as you come further down, and one tributary, the Tararurau, has got slightly less than pristine water conditions on, because there's a few big sheep and beef farms up there, but it's still exceedingly good water quality. As the river flows down into the plains, it changes its character, and it's surrounded, the stop banks for flood control and that sort of thing. But that section of the river actually feeds the whole of the Hiratonga Plains community and the aquifer that all of the productive value of the Hiratonga Plains.
Everybody's wells coming out of that, basically.
Yeah, so it's in the same way as you've got the Hiratonga Plains is really second only to the Canterbury Plains as an extensive sort of east coast, semi-arid sort of rain shadow area of highly productive, highly fertile plains, which, because it's in the rain shadow of the spine of New Zealand, it's dry.
Yeah, it's what makes this
And
place special.
That's why,
That's why I'm here.
It's why it makes the wine so special.
Yeah.
But in that dry environment, just like in California, you need some water to keep things going.
Yeah, well, it's always been an issue there, forever. And
So, and it's fascinating that there's actually a fairly short section of the river from Marakakaho down to Fern Hill, which is only a matter of a few kilometres, and most of the water for the whole of the Hiratonga Plains falls out of the bottom of the river just running down through there. 4 cubic metres a second.
It's pretty heavy up further than that, and then it gets all braided and low, by the time it hits down near us, basically,
So from the perspective of the Water Conservation Order and the decision of Fish and Game and the other applicants to apply for an order, which is essentially making a waterway into a national park is the kind of way to think of it. It's locking it up.
Who are the other applicants? Because I was reading there was really 6 or 7, right?
There's 5.
5, okay.
So there's
I know it's bird and forestry or whatever. What is it?
Fish and Game New Zealand, Forest and Bird New Zealand.
Bird,
there's some kayakers in there, whitewater rafters. There's Jet Boating New Zealand, and there's...
That's a random one.
Well, okay. They use a river there, but the funny thing about them is
petrol into the river,
Yeah, and they love the water being nice and low. It gets more exciting for them, so they actually don't care that there's too much water in the river.
Yeah, that's a random one. But anyway,
and then Ngāti Horiki Kaupatiki, an iwi subgroup or hapu sub-tribe. That are actually in the bottom, right at the bottom of the river, or where the river used to be, because actually their awa, their river, is the Clive now, which is actually because in the 1950s it was actually the bottom part of the river was diverted. So in fact the Nararara doesn't even flow past them anymore, which is not to belittle their interest in the quality of the water running past their doorstep, but running past their marae. But technically, they aren't actually part of the Nararara.
But they do have
itself.
a river going through there? It's a different one?
Yes, it's Clive. It's part of the Karamu system, which is actually a lowland stream system. So what happened is they still have the channel, but instead of having the full force of a major North Island, river coming down from Snowfed to a certain extent and a major system. They only have a lowland river coming through now, so and comes through the township. Have a lot.
I remember when I first moved here and I was driving across these bridges, like Fern Hill and stuff, and some of the ones around Hastings, and thinking, oh, they've really gone pretty safe with these stop banks and these bridges, and then we had, I think, it was like a huge winter, spring, I can't remember, and it was getting close to the bridges, and I thought, oh, okay, that's why, because it can roar. That must have been 09 or 10 or something like that.
It was a real good one in 2007. We had, out on the coast, we had over 300 mils of rain in about 48 hours.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I don't know if this was snow melting and it was just a long period of rain, too, down here, because, we don't get snow down on the plains, but it can roar when it's really, really going for it. But going back to, the conservation and all that, which is, there's obviously a great reason for that, and there's different parties involved in doing that. But going back to the dairy part, partially for people to understand that, what's going into the water, but how you could actually stop it outside of moving back from the water or, reclaiming certain areas, which I don't know if that's part of the conservation order would be, but outside of just we can't draw as much water off of there. But how do you actually fix the issue of, is that too sensitive, not for you to talk about, but for people to approach the idea of like, well, dairy or, I'm guessing it's just dairy, that they got to back off, and they can't farm in certain areas. Is that part of the order, and is there another solution besides just, I don't know, whatever, you got to move a kilometer away from the river or whatever it is,
Well, the fortunate thing for us in the Nararara is that there's almost no dairying in the system, and that is most likely one of the reasons why the water quality is still exceedingly high. So what the order seeks to do is essentially preserve
What's going
these
on?
very high, these exceptional values, a range of values of the river, and preserve them for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so water conservation orders the key question is, are there values that, important, nationally outstanding environmental values in that system, in that river system? And if there are, if the applicants can prove to a certain standardness through the special tribunal inquiry that there are nationally outstanding environmental values in that system, then it can be eligible for a water conservation order. So what that does, technically, the underlying assumption is that you're preserving the status quo. And the status quo for us is actually that you've got a very pristine upper part of the river, and then you've got the lower part of the river, which is runs through a highly modified,
It's been changed.
agricultural and urban environment, and is being, that has extractive uses as well as recreational uses and all those kind of things. So we're already doing all these things. We're already taking water from the system, from the groundwater, from the river itself, to run our factories, to keep out, the community, more than 100,000 people ticking over, and for agriculture and horticulture. So that's already happening. So it can be argued that all the water conservation order is doing is saying, well, look, you've had, well, let's not take any more. Let's not make things any worse than they are. The devil's in the detail, though. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and the application does seek to raise the minimum flows that apply to cutting off irrigation. It also entrains all the groundwater, so it becomes highly complex. The actual meaning, once you roll in the water quality standards that have been proposed, it starts to get more complex again, and then it becomes quite a technical question as to whether existing activities are still permitted or not. So that's the space we're in now. Really, is on the one hand the special tribunal hearing arguments for what the values are, and as we go through the hearings, then we'll get to a point where we'll say, well, so there may be these values, and if the values are sufficiently outstanding, then there'll be consideration of what sort of protection is required. And anyway, so what happened was a decision was made to split the hearings in half, based around a point in the river, and that point's called Whanawhana, which it marks a change from essentially a virtually pristine river with in a sort of a gorge canyon, very confined state with essentially no groundwater attached to it. Below the Whanawhana cableway, it spills out into flatter land, and then a significant groundwater aquifer becomes developed and spreads across the Herotanga Plains, and it turns into a braided river.
People are there,
and people start interacting with it a lot more. So that was a reasonably natural sort of a point to say, look, the tribunal will consider the values of the top part of the river, which is much more likely to generate an agreement that there are nationally outstanding values there.
Yeah.
And then later on, in this stage, the proposal is for sometime towards the middle of next year to hear the case for the values in the lower part of the river, and then potentially to talk about the restrictions and prohibitions that may go along with basically the rules.
Hawke's Bay wine grower guy's speaking Monday, and is that what you said?
Yep. So there's three of us speaking Monday, and what we're doing is we're explaining our position, which is essentially to say, look, we're reasonably relaxed about and we conditionally support the idea of a conservation order for the upper part of the river.
Okay.
because fundamentally our industry doesn't want to make it any worse. It's fantastic. Nothing that we do, we're not growing any grapes up there, we're not making any wine up there. It's too high up the system to affect us. And we understand the community broadly wants to see those pristine or near pristine values preserved. So why would we not support that?
Sure.
And you have to appreciate that sense that attitude is driven by other things that are going on. It's driven by the wider appreciation that the public in Hawke's Bay is very concerned about water quality. We're concerned to see improvements in conditions that don't, across the board, and also that there is a process which is a community collaborative process for limit setting called the TANK group, which has been running for nearly 5 years, or actually just over 5 years now.
So what's the worry? The worry is that the WCO kind of would overshadow all that.
Yeah. So we've had this TANK process running for 5 years.
What's the acronym again?
Tutaikuri, Ahuriri, Nararora, Karamu. That's the name of the 4 catchments.
That's why I didn't remember it.
3 rivers and one estuary that make up the Hiratonga Plains water systems. Mm-hmm. So, that's brought together all sectors of the community. So it's the strong representation from environment groups, from iwi, so from Māoridom, from local tribes, primary producers, both horticultural, viticultural, and agricultural, and the local councils, so your Hastings District Council, your Napier City Council, as well as a swag of people from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, who are the regulators, so they're responsible for controlling water quality and quantity.
That all sounds really good. Like somebody, I'm looking from the outside in, I go, oh, well, that seems like it's a good dialogue, and there's a way for people to speak up and get involved and all that. But from what I can tell from just, again, going to a couple meetings, that it seems like it's being, and pardon the pun, trumped by by this other order that's coming in. And I guess my first question is, well, then who are the new players? If that means, is it a more national level? Is it, and they're coming and they're sort of interjecting into this system that's been going on for a while, this dialogue that's been going on for a little while. And that seems to, people are throwing up their arms saying, what the hell has happened here? We feel like we've lost this dialogue now.
Yeah, so a lot of the members of TANK, of which I'm just one of 30 or more, felt quite aggrieved that their efforts and goodwill to try and reach a mutually acceptable community, solution for the future, for the next 10 to 20, 30 years for the Hiratonga Plains, was being undermined by this application for water conservation order. And three of the parties that made up the applicant, so the Fish and Game, Forest and Bird, and Ngāti Hori ki Kohopātiki, are also on TANK. So that obviously raised some eyebrows. But
it was like, you did this behind our backs, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, you could be excused from thinking that's the way it was. Look, and they will say, and fairly too, that they've been working on that water conservation order for a lot longer than TANK's been going, for 10 years or more. So, that is, the law is there. They're completely entitled to make an application for water conservation order. So, I don't think it's very productive to dwell too much on the fact that they've chosen to do that. We just have to deal with the fact that they have. I mean, we'd much prefer that they didn't, because it's another highly complex and expensive, time-consuming process to be involved in, and it introduces a lot of uncertainty. And the practical problem for us in the lower part of the river is that water conservation orders are very rigid, very hard to change, and are not sufficiently flexible. They're too inflexible to allow the community to manage the resource and balance the various competing values that we've spent 5 years in tank, trying to get, and getting very close now to a point of reaching agreement
and a solution. Yeah.
It
just seems strange that one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because, first of all, I knew you would, and I know you know a lot about this, but I would love to talk to somebody. And again, it's going back to one of the first things you said. There's not sides in this thing, but there's obviously a stronger feeling about something there from that group or that faction, if you will. And I'd be curious to know, did they think that, tank wasn't working fast enough, or did they, again, you said it started a long time ago, but clearly they've gone through the legal process to get this all, put in place and get the wheels turning for it. So they feel strongly about something that they want done, and that word rigid is something that I would worry about, and you'd just be curious what would happen in a drought year, and what would happen. And I'm not even talking about the growers and everybody out here. I'm talking about the people in town. How would that affect them if you have such rigid things? You know what I mean?
Potentially, they're just as affected as we are.
So, and I don't see it. I don't see a lot of people watering their lawns in Hawke's Bay and wasting water like on a community level. I think people take it pretty seriously. So I don't think it's more taking a shower, maybe watering your little garden or something like that. But I don't see a lot of, blatant community waste out there with, big lawns and, water going all night or anything like that, So, yeah, rigid is and then I also read some things and heard some things at those meetings about water storage and how, why you wouldn't be able to draw off to store some water, for whether or not that would even help,
Well, it's part of a potential trade-off in that if there are, further restrictions placed on taking water during summer low flows, then the logical, fallback is to store winter high flow water. And that's, it has an effect. You're taking winter high flow water out of the river. It has, some effect on those in-stream values, but not nearly as much as
has the well ever gone dry? And literally, in Hawke's Bay,
I believe in the 1970s, in an extreme drought, the river did actually dry up.
But the wells, though,
no.
The aquifers, right? Like nobody ever.
No, and look, there's the regional council has just spent $2 million on a new hydrological model for the Herotama Plains, and that shows very clearly that we are not even close to needing to be concerned about extracting more from the. Thank you very much for that wine.
Yeah.
Extracting more from the aquifer than it can take. So we're still. You do your mass balance and see how much, there's so much water coming in from rainfall and, up in the catchment, and you look at how much we're taking out collectively. That's the community and industry and irrigators. And there's still a lot that's flowing out to sea, both through the river and through the aquifer and ending up in the freshwater springs out in the middle of Hawke's Bay. So we're a long way away from drawing it dry. We're not even within 50% of doing that. What does happen though is the more that you take out, the bigger seasonal fluctuations you get. So that is consideration, and the bigger your seasonal fluctuations, the more likely you are to people start seeing effects on, you can start affecting your neighbours, but also it has an effect on wetlands, and there aren't many wetlands left, from hundreds of years of drainage and bringing swamps into production, and without an appreciation of the ecosystem services that wetlands provide. So, given that there are so few wetlands left in the dry side of New Zealand, Hawke's Bay included, there's environmental groups and everyone should be rightly concerned to preserve them. So that does present a practical limit on the amount that we can extract from groundwater. There's no appetite for increasing that, because we know now, science tells us clearly that we will.
I think there'll be I don't know. From what I can tell, there's going to be the population of the area is going to continue, and we might start having to build up and a little bit out, but there can't be much more good farmland around that really would be putting in a lot of wells. Maybe there isn't, but deeper up inland,
Yeah, well, there's still a bit of land around the Crownthorpe area, and you've got these upper parts of the table lands above the river, the slightly higher elevations that we grow our cooler climate varieties, your Pinot Gris and your Chardonnay. And
I get some Sauv Blanc, my Rosé up there. I totally understand, but I just
the constraint up there is, there is still land, there is still excellent land up there, but the water's not available at the moment. So we're certainly interested in seeing if out of all this, there's one of the silver linings to the cost that we're facing and the potential risk to some of our existing businesses, that we may, if we can get some access to stored water from at times of high flows, then there's further, we can grow the industry in those elevated areas.
No, it's certainly good up there. I'm a believer in the Crownthorpe area, and sort of offers a bit of an alternative. And as we see these appellations developed in this area, I suppose the elephant in the room though is the giblet gravels, which I've done a whole series on this podcast, talking to winemakers and viticulturists from there, and I'm sure the term hydroponic wine growing has come out a couple times on that, and how free draining it is and all that, which is for 2017 it was a great thing to have when we had a couple cyclones come through. I think that's when that region really shines, is in those type of years. But that's an area where I talked to Mark Krasnow on this as well, and we thought, and I know you've involved with Mark, and you think, you could get on to a 8-year plan to go dry farming someday, or as close to it as you could, but I don't know how you do that on the giblet gravels. I'm not an expert on it, but I think I have worked on the giblet gravels quite a bit, and
so it's really interesting listening to what Mark has to say about that, and even almost irrespective of the rootstocks that we're using, and that if we work hard enough at it, we push our vines hard enough, that in time we may, even on that sort of country, be able to dry farm. What he can't say with more confidence is that whether we could actually survive economically doing that because of the yields, because of the
that's why I threw out 10 years or something, because you would have to, do it by block. And, George Fistanich is the first one to say to me, he goes, we saw a significant drop in yields for our, organic and dry farm production, but now they're the most resilient, and we're getting amazing quality out of those blocks. And but it took time and investment, and I can totally appreciate that's not an easy thing to do, and it's almost like this Water Conservation Act. It shouldn't be a snap overnight thing, or even a few year thing. It should be something we're trying to work towards.
Yeah, well, the comment's often made that it's taken us a couple of hundred years of development of Western civilization, for want of a better word, in New Zealand to get us to this point. Is it realistic to, in those areas where you have got concerns about the environment, to turn around within the space of a couple of years? So it's it's multi-generational to get to this point. Arguably it's at least generational to get us back to something that a space that the community's happy to be in. And there's no one right answer.
No.
It's a community negotiation in every area, every catchment essentially. But just as an example, in the Waikato, the heart of dairying in New Zealand, and the largest river in New Zealand, and their plan allows them 80 years to, they have a plan stepped out over 80 years to improve the water quality in the Waikato.
So does that have a lot to do with, catchment ponds and stuff like that, and settlement areas to get to, like how, again, we're talking about getting shit in the river basically, or shit in the water,
So really, I mean, one of the key things about managing water quality is that it's very specific to your catchment. So, each catchment, the characteristics, the water quality characteristics, vary hugely depending on, your aspect, your rainfall, your topography and the land use activities that are going on there. So I think the best where you can generalise is to say that the best way to manage it is to get the people who are actually, having the effects to engage them in being part of the solution. And that's
totally, yeah. You don't want to go out and finger point and say you got to do this and that, and it's because it is a community issue, and what guy does up the road, affects Jim this way and that, and just speaking from the wine industry, I mean, what kind of effect do we have on this region with tourism and all the businesses around here? It's not even 6 degrees; it's 2 degrees of separation between any industry and another one. Whether it's wine orchards. I've got friends who are in farmers in other areas that we're all in it together, sort of. We're doing different things, but we're any accounting firm, anybody that's in town doing a townie job, it's all dependent on what's going on out this way as well. So the solution needs to be everybody together. And that's what sounded good about the tank thing, and I guess is a little scary about the WCO that, and of course we see the signs as you're driving around our community and this and that, which I know New Zealand or Hawke's Bay wine growers is, we're not saying we're going to be that.
we don't think the sky is going to fall on our head if the water conservation order goes ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, as I said before, the key to, this is international best practice, the key to managing complex environmental problems is to engage the community.
Have to.
But it is carrot and stick. You do need to not only, you want to have people willingly doing their part, understanding that they have an effect, and being allowed to be creative, and you don't ask a regulator, you don't get a regulator to tell a grape grower or a dairy farmer how to run their business better. You say, these are the outcomes, these are the results I need from you. Now, please go away and do it. Now, please do it. I'd rather you did it willingly, and we'll cut you some slack and we'll design the rules so that it's in your interests to take ownership. But if you don't, we've got this big stick here and we're probably going to, whack you with it.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of the carrot and stick. But that, tank is about finding that balance, so that, and this is the message that a lot of us in the primary sector repeat very regularly, to say, look, you just tell us what you need as a community, and we'll figure out how to get it done.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things about that I've seen living in New Zealand is we pivot pretty quick. We find solutions. I mean, what's going on in the last 10 years since I've been here and what happened in the 10 years before that, you just see it leaps and bounds of what, so we'll find a way to get it done and adjust, And
it's interesting that probably the biggest issue in the Narara catchment is not, and because we, in part because we don't have dairy, the water quality is not actually, well, the nutrient status of the water is actually not a problem, and we don't have a lot of, we don't have biological problems with it. So, very low E. coli counts, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's sediment. and that's so the river system is carrying a lot of sediment, and not only does that, if you have too much sediment in the water, then it affects, it fills up it gets in between the boulders, it changes the nature of your stream bed, and it becomes less supportive of a range of stream life. But it also ends up down in the estuaries, and the major problem that we have in our system overall is that we're getting far too much sediment down in the estuaries.
So what's causing that? Is that development though?
Part of it is just natural processes, and sediment's very event driven. So your cyclone boulders, the big cyclones that come down from from the Pacific, from time to time. We have 2007 event, for example. Maybe every 3 or 4 years, without wanting to generalise, we have these massive events where you get major overland flows of sediment, and those are the really big events that drive the really big changes in the catchment from a sediment point of view. So, but the challenge is we have to manage and come up with solutions bearing those, to try and deal with those one-off large events, which, possibly with climate change are actually
climate change, and also
intensifying.
There was an earthquake, 1930 that, took out half the swamplands in Napier. There was an earthquake in 1860 that shifted the Nara River. I mean, these are things that are, in the grand scheme of things are pretty. That's like yesterday, in the history of the planet. It's earlier today. It really.
But we do know, and we've got reasonably good science around the idea that we can identify parts of the catchment that are more prone to giving up sediment under stressful conditions, high rainfall conditions. And those are candidates for some kind of change in land use. So trees, more trees in the landscape is definitely going to be the way of the future. And some of those trees will be on farmland, and there will probably be a mixture of plantation forestry and your manukas for your honey production and hardwood production and that sort of thing. So we will see one thing I can just about guarantee out of this: the results from the tank plan change will be a big impetus to planting trees in those areas that are most prone to slipping.
Jacinda's going to plant 1 billion trees. What was it, 1 million trees or whatever it was?
She can come and plant a few trees here.
That would be good. I was just thinking, that it's just again about how young everything is and how young New Zealand is, but I was also wondering.
Oh, you're flattering me now.
Yeah. Not you, Xan. You're not. Yeah.
No. What are you saying?
No, but I was thinking about like where we're at on the Bridgepot Triangle, and I always I see old maps and things, and then I will read a little bit of history, and it's pretty evident that a lot was cleared away at some stage. Though
100 years ago, if you went to Bridgepot, you'd be standing in the middle of the river. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah. But other areas, there's probably been some trees that have cleared. I mean, how much? There's not a lot of old trees around here.
No. So look, the Hiratonga Plains was a swamp. It was rivers and swamps and lowland bush. Kahikatea, so quite large trees and a mixture of, swamp, your Raupo swamps and that sort of thing, and so that was, quite, and the Maori got around in canoe, that was the easiest way to get around the place. So, drainage.
Yeah.
Pakeha and the drains came along and a lot of the water disappeared out of the landscape. So
yeah,
it'd be quite fun to get a little bit of it back. I'm a big fan of the idea. I mean, we have to. The thing about improving water quality is everyone has an effect. So you really want to a certain extent anyway. You really want to engage everybody in the solution, and everyone pays their rates. All your landowners are paying their rates to the regional council, who are tasked with responsibility for air, land, and water. And so, if everybody's feeling a little bit of the pinch of, their financial investments are required to get that, but also, people's businesses, industry and their households are, the major users of water. Together about half of the water that's used. So, they need to take some responsibility, for doing their bit. But the opportunity is to explain how the future, with investment back into waterways as part of the landscape, just how much fun, and how much benefit, how much enjoyment people could get out of that, just bringing more wildlife. It's part of, reinvigorating biodiversity, bringing the native wildlife back into communities.
I think it's
and
huge.
in a food basket as well. So there's so many opportunities.
I've seen it in communities in the States where they just, they had a dead old stream running through town, and they had some environmental issues, and to engage the community, not only did they have some task force and things that improved things, and there was a lot more from basically the 70s onward in the environment, but even more recently they decided, I'm thinking of one particular town in South Carolina where they just decided to make this river area not only have wildlife, but also that's where you go ride your bike, that's where you go run, that's where the community meets, that's where the park is, and everybody became aware of it overnight there, and it just completely changed the whole region, and it keeps getting better there. You know what I mean? So I think that I kind of feel what you're saying there.
Yeah. So that's one of my little challenges with Tank, is to try and we've been talking to the community for quite a while now about what we're doing. I'm hoping we can deliver something quite inspirational, not some dry plan change with a low flow limit at the Fernhill Bridge and some controls below Whanawhana Cableway, but something a bit more, inspirational and guiding. But people need to see and and understand the sort of real opportunities there are to improve the communities that they live in through reinvesting in our waterways.
So if people want to follow this, know more outside of just you go online and read the latest thing in the Herald or the Hawke's Bay Today, what's the best way for them to get engaged, find out more information? These are open meetings to the public, first of all?
Yes. Hawke's Bay Regional Council website, hbrc.govt.nz, is a good place to start. There's also look in the biodiversity section as well, if you're interested in more in that side of things. There's a lot of activity going on in Hawke's Bay. There's a big push going into biodiversity improvements, and the Cape to the City sanctuary, wildlife sanctuary. So there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of investment starting to go into really bringing the outdoors, bringing our diverse, unique wildlife back into the city.
And what about I don't want to end on a bad note. What about the there's been people talking about, I don't even know the name of the company that bottles water and exports it off of one of our rivers here in Hawke's Bay upstream or something.
There's a number of them.
There's a few of them. And I think that's probably one of the only, but probably the best example I know of something where people feel a little bit lost and sort of pushed out as far as how does that happen? You know what I mean? How is that? But what is the real effect of that? And what, as far as I mean, you're obviously more in the loop than most people. So, what do you have to say about that? I mean, it might be
personally, I hate bottled water, but having lived in countries where you can't drink the water in the tap, I appreciate that it has a role.
I agree. Yeah.
Personally, I don't think it has a role in a place like New Zealand where you can happily drink the tap water,
except for when there's a water issue.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
But the regional council, and it just feels wrong to most Kiwis that anyone can just come along, pay a few $100s in application fees, and get a consent, throw up a factory and get a consent to take vast amounts of water, what appear to be vast amounts of water, and make a profit on exporting it. And sometimes when it's foreigners doing that, Kiwis might feel even more aggrieved than otherwise. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to look at it. There was a legitimate concern that because we have no groundwater limits set, so there's no rules around how much water could be taken, that there was open slathers. So
Sure.
The council has moved to stop that. They've said that the new science that they have, the new hydrological model, demonstrates that we can't keep on granting more water rights without having an effect on
Seems
the
obvious.
system.
Yeah.
So they've got the justification to say that, and now they have said no more. So there are an existing small number of water bottlers. One of the things about water is you have to, there are huge numbers involved. So it's easy to get swayed by a very large number, but you've got to look at it in the context of a very much larger number, which
Could
is
be
the amount
literally
of
a drop in the
water
ocean.
in the system.
Yeah,
So they're not at the moment, and because essentially further applications have been stopped, it's not a major problem. I wish they go away. Yeah, probably. I'd be quite happy if they weren't there.
I did see some of those boxes around though when the water did go to shit for a few weeks there back earlier. Was it earlier this year or last year? I think it was last year.
Yeah.
So
They do have their place, unfortunately.
yeah. So, but anyway, well, thanks for talking to me. I mean, I'd be interested to speak again maybe in 6 months or something, and hopefully it's that kind of gradual process that because I think there's a lot of people who know nothing or are confused or scared and all that, and we all get caught up in our lives busy doing our own thing, but it's obviously a big issue and something that could affect everybody very seriously. So yeah, maybe we can chat again if there's some updates down the road.
Yeah. Well, I think the fear will go out of the water conservation water application, and I think I'm impressed that the chair is fair-minded individual from what I can see.
That's
Richard Fowler.
You mentioned him.
So yeah, I think the special tribunal, all the members have conducted themselves well. And
who is it? What's his background? He's
no, I couldn't tell how he has a legal background.
but he's a local or national guy?
No.
Probably good to have somebody from the outside, coming in.
But anyway, so I think the order will get a fair hearing from all perspectives. I think that there'll be a lot better understanding developed about some of the problems of detail. So there's the principle, and on a level of principle, we're quite happy as an industry to see something happen.
Sure, yeah.
And then there's the devil in that detail. But I think a lot of that will get sorted out. So next
Good.
time we talk about that, I think it'll be the community will be having a much more informed conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say,
settled
we'll have
conversation.
some more information. Yeah. Cool, we'll leave it there. And thanks for coming around the corner for a chat.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Oh, pretty good. I hope you guys feel better. At least you local people who are like me were a bit confused on this issue and are a bit scared of what happened last year with our water here in Hawke's Bay and how it's going to move forward. I think I understand a little more. I hope you guys do. Feel free to write us an email, and you can always tweet me at DecibelDan. You can email me or email us at wineisfood@gmail.com. Give that out, why not? And Xan's a very approachable guy. If you have any questions or concerns about what he said, certainly go for it. But I just think the main thing is that in this world where it's a lot of tweets and blurbs and blips and little short articles, that it's really, really important not only to have these tribunals and sit down and work these issues out, but it's also important for us to talk to each other outside of that and sit down for these long-form conversations. And I hope the rest of the media and the rest of the public finds time that when they're interested in an issue to not just dismiss it in a short blurb or a tweet or, a 2-paragraph article. There's just no way these complex issues and opinions can be expressed that way. So I hope I asked some questions that, I'm innocent in the issue anyway, and I'm a bit naive to it all. So I hope I asked some questions that were helpful. And I really do think Xan explained it the best that he could to somebody who's a dummy like me. So anyway, thank you guys for listening. Like I said, we're coming into December, Christmas time. So use the promo code DB Podcast if you want to get 10% off your orders and free shipping within New Zealand. And we have the wine club sign up on there right now for that you'd have to get in for December 15th. We're doing 3 and 6 bottle lots out to folks, and we've got some really cool new wines in there in the mix there, including if you get the 6th one, you get the Junta, the Malbec Nouveau, which we had the party for a couple weeks ago. That was a lot of fun at Bare Knuckle. Big shout out to the guys at Bare Knuckle Barbecue, man. That was awesome. Tam and Jimmy and Chef Jonathan, those guys are killing it there. Go check it out. Texas barbecue here in Hawke's Bay, and they're legit. They brought a smoker in from America and did it right. All right, guys. Cheers. Thanks.